What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the Sixers Digest YouTube channel. My name is Barnard, and the NBA season is fast approaching. That training camp is now right around the corner, and the focus has begun to shift from the off-court moves and drama to who will actually be there at training camp. And the biggest question mark there is James Harden. So for today, I'm here to break down Adrian Wojnarowski from ESPN, breaking down a little clarity on the expectations for James Harden as the season approaches, as well as to dive into what this means for the Sixers, what this means for Harden, and the outlook for there. Now, before I dive fully into it, I would like to recommend that you guys are subscribing to the channel. I do appreciate all the subscriptions that we've gotten so far, but there's still 93% of you guys out there who have not clicked that subscribe button. We got a ton of big plans coming up for the Sixers season that I want to get everybody involved in. Appreciate it for everyone who's tuned in so far. I want to make sure that keeps growing. So thank you guys, and let's get right into it today. So for starters, Woj popped on ESPN to talk a little bit about the James Harden situation as a whole, and there's two notable quotes that I wanted to pull up here. Number one is, quote, "The expectation is that the Sixers expect James Harden to be in training camp. What happens from there, it's certainly going to be a challenge for this organization. We've seen it in a different way with Ben Simmons." And then a later quote, he said, quote, "The test for the Sixers is going to be how they support Nick Nurse, their new coach. If James Harden comes in, if he's not at optimum performance, optimum commitment, the idea is to have Nick Nurse play the players who are buying into this." So I really like that second quote there. Number one, that they're putting kind of the control in Nick Nurse's hands. If we think back to earlier this summer when Nick Nurse was asked about the question about James Harden, if he's going to be a member of the Sixers, and he kind of stuttered on it, shifted, and said how it's basically up to James, that James has a tough decision. And this was, of course, before James Harden opted into that player option to put him under roster with the Sixers, which he currently stands. We know all the trade rumors. We all know the noise. We know the breaking points that has pushed us to this powerful quote from James Harden here.
Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again.
But the bottom line is James Harden is under contract for the Sixers, and until a trade is done, the expectation will be for him to be there. Now, I don't think it is a question of if James Harden will be there. He will be at training camp. And the reason that I believe that is this little blurb from the CBA here that I'll pull up, and a couple things I want to touch on here. For starters, this is a quote from Bobby Marks of ESPN as well, and he says, quote, "Withholding services. A player who withholds playing services called for by a player contract for more than 30 days after the start of last season covered by his player contract shall be deemed not to have completed his player contract by rendering the playing services called for thereunder," Marks conveyed on Twitter. "Accordingly, such a player shall not be a veteran free agent and shall not be entitled to negotiate or sign a player contract with any other professional basketball team unless and until the team for which the player last played for expressly agrees otherwise. In simpler terms, if Harden chooses to hold out for more than 30 days into the regular season, he would no longer be able to hit free agency next summer because he would not have completed the terms of his contract unless the Sixers let him go. Not to mention, the star guard would incur a significant amount of fines if he has a lengthy holdout. To my knowledge, this clause has never been needed to be applied to an NBA history at this point." So the point there being that if James Harden does elect to hold out, if he does not show up, he could mess himself up next offseason. And we all know that he is eyeing a massive contract there. That seems to be the goal in all of this, is to get his chicks in a line, get his ducks in a line to make sure that he is putting himself in a position to get a massive payday next offseason. Now, if that is the case, I believe James Harden has to have a real look in the mirror and figure out the best route to this. Because kind of the debate and how this goes and how these justing for position and holdout and all the other terminology that you want to throw in this, what the two conversations are is either a player plays well enough that it inspires another team to go out and reach the price the team is commanding in a trade. So in this situation, that would be James Harden averaging 20 and 10 again. The Clippers looking and thinking, okay, maybe that is our missing piece to being the team that we seek to be. Or the other part of it, as a player is so annoying that a team just wants to get him out of there, and they're willing to take pennies on the dollar in a trade, which has been the case with James Harden before. If you want to date back to past altercations and past situations, both in Houston and in Brooklyn, that has been the James Harden route, that he's just going to be as annoying as humanly possible. He's going to cause as much of an issue. He's not going to be locked in. He's going to be overweight, all these things to motivate a team to trade him, to get him off the roster. And then he gets to a new location. He sells them on, this is where I actually want to be. This is where I see my long-term future. And then we see if that actually happens. And it has not at any location yet. That is kind of the James Harden cycle. But what is different about this cycle specifically is that this summer has to have been a wake-up call to James Harden. that when you look around and there's just not a legitimate offer for you on the open market outside of these Sixers, which, by the way, wasn't even truly an offer, that this was already in his contract last year. He had this $35 million player option. All reports are stating that the Sixers did not offer James Harden a contract at all. I do believe they would have. We know that they were playing it safe with the tampering rule after receiving a hefty punishment and stripped draft picks last offseason. That's been the stance by the organization, that they just wanted to make sure they followed all rules completely. We know that doesn't really happen across the NBA. That's kind of one of those rules in place. They were obviously dinged for it last year and got in trouble, so I understand them trying to be extra careful, but I do think this is a way to save face, buy them some extra time, and let Harden kind of make his decision known. And frankly, if that was the stance by Daryl Morey, if he said to James Harden, you either accept this player option for $35 million or we're not offering you anything else, I'm absolutely okay with that. That I am absolutely okay with this being a one-year thing at the minimum. But my point being about why this is different for Harden is he's 34 years old. We know he's declining. We know he's not the player that he once was. And if there was not a market for him this summer from a team, if he goes and causes a whole stink, is a head case in the locker room, and does not play up to the standard that is hoped, why would another team offer him a contract next summer when he's a year older, when he still is having these same issues, and like just more on the plate? Reputations stick to a guy. When you become a frequent member of the headache club, of a guy causing a scene, causing an offseason, which James Harden has in several occasions of his career now, that sticks to a guy. And when those headaches begin to outweigh the on-court production, teams look at you differently, that you're no longer worth it. And that's kind of what we're seeing for James Harden. And I do think there are signs of him potentially understanding that himself. There's been a couple pictures floating around of him at workouts here, and he does not look to be in fat Harden mode or out of shape. This was a picture from him working out publicly in China on the same tour where he had that Morey video here. But he does not look out of shape, and he was going through a pretty rigorous workout routine in front of everyone. I did skim through and watch all that. A lot of kind of the movement stuff, using the bands, hops, jumps, all that kind of that type of workout. So that's good to see for James Harden. That should be the stuff that he's working on. We also can't rule out that he shows up to training camp and mysteriously that hamstring injury starts acting back up and he can't play. And that might be his way to loophole this. So there's a ton on the table. I do think it is notable from Woj's perspective that Harden is expected to show up. As much as we can call out Harden for a lot of things, he's not dumb when it comes to money, that he's going to be well aware of the fact of this, that these are the standards that could be brought up if he does elect to hold out. And that's the biggest reason why I fully expect to see him in a Sixers uniform to some extent. To me, it's not a question of if we see him in a Sixers uniform, it's what level he cares. And the fact that Nick Nurse is seemingly having the freedom to basically kick him out if he's not doing his job, to look past him, to play other guys, give other guys a chance, I think that's a very good thing from an organizational standpoint. We kind of saw something similar with Ben Simmons. He, of course, did show up to practice after a couple days and after he was basically strong-armed into being there, and Doc Rivers simply threw him out of practice right away. And all the reputations there are that you would have to do a lot for Doc Rivers to throw you out of practice, that he is not a guy that does that frequently, that he would have to really be not trying, really be not caring, and that was obviously the case. So we saw that with Doc Rivers. I think with Nick Nurse, he's going to have to come in with even stronger of kind of a personality. We know that it's his first year as head coach. This is his time to set the culture. It's got to be the case with or without James Harden. I'm happy the organization seems on that same page. And we basically just have to wait this thing out. I think the best case scenario for James Harden would be to buy in, to play his best basketball, and prove to other teams why they should still want him. I think for the Sixers, the best case scenario is for that version of James Harden to show up, to try on the court, to make somewhat of an impact. Because as much as there's flaws in his game, as much as there is problems with the way that he plays basketball, James Harden is still an elite playmaker, one of the top 40 players in the entire sport, and a guy that there's no one on the trade market the Sixers can really improve with at this point in time. So Daryl Morey is well aware that he's going to continue to stare down James Harden for his trade request, stare down other teams as they send these lowball offers if they are even coming in. And for now, we're just going to have to see what happens when training camp comes around. So I appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. A ton more content on the way. Sixers season is almost here. Training camp on the way. So I'm excited to get fully rolling. Once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Ring that bell so you're keeping up with all the content here on Sixers Digest. And I will talk with you next time. Peace.